want to do one last thing because we've got 5 minutes left. So if you, by some quirk of fate, became the editor of the New York Times and you called up your whoever is covering Afghanistan, what stories would you ask them to do right now that would give an international audience a real sense of what's going on? And I think I'll start with Summia and then Zahra and then Sammy.
Yeah, I think that's a tough question.
You're a new journalist, so it's harder for you. I expect you to know.
I think I would definitely focus on, I think going back to the earlier point I made, I think it's very important to ensure that we're bringing stories of individuals who have maybe not been covered or their voices have not been heard of communities. But also, I think educate people about different, ethnic tensions that exist in Afghanistan. I think there's lack of acknowledgement on that when it comes to international media's approach, and whether that's like New York Times or any media outlet. I think it's very important that we talk about it and we don't look at Afghanistan as this like united front country or like a homogenous body. I think it's very important that we look at different issues that pertain to different ethnic groups and what they're trying to advocate and different issues, and cover those stories and ensure that they have journalists from communities who know what is going on in their community, because the way things work in Afghanistan is that it's really hard to hear people share their vulnerabilities unless they trust you, especially with what's going on in the country. And it's important to find people within those communities and allow them, journalists in those communities, and hear their voices and their issues and cover those. So I'd really emphasize on that. Yeah.
Okay. Zahra, probably you're already producing and assigning exactly what I'm asking about. So what would you do? What would be your top story? Not so much, remember that now this is for a Western audience. What do you want them to know?
Sure. I think Afghanistan would be like a black box of like full of undercovered stories. Like there's so much story that you can look in Afghanistan, especially now. Like this is like a different world now, like you can feel like you're going to an ancient society where like people are being executed, like flagged on the sport stadium. Like that's like totally, a different world now. We are talking about a different Afghanistan. So what at top of my mind, if I would be like commissioning a story for the New York Times, that would be a story of like, let's say like there is estimated 20 million women in Afghanistan. There is no legal system to support them. There is no organization that count or take status of like how they do suffer, what's the statistics on like domestic violence, what's the statistics on the gender-based violence. So we used to have a Ministry of Women Affairs that was also supporting women, running shelters, doing some work for women in Afghanistan. Then we have Independent Human Rights Commission of Afghanistan, which also would investigate, would document violence against women, and would also somehow investigate these cases. They're all gone. How do women of Afghanistan live now? Like when their husbands, like, because of course we know that the Taliban give the authority to men to do whatever they're free to do with women in their houses. But if they go out without a face covering, the men would be punished. So they also take the agency from Afghan women to exert, to resist the Taliban by themselves. So what's life like for them? Like if a woman is, I don't know, there's so many scenarios that you can look into, like if a woman is being, so we have one story that we couldn't cover, but I can tell it here. There was one woman whose husband was in the West, who fled like in Europe, and then this woman, she wanted to get a divorce from her husband. Then the husband paid somebody, the Taliban, to go and hit his like father-in-law and put them in prison. And this woman, like there's so many complicated story of like, now this woman, she has nowhere to go, her father is in the prison, and her brother is like, you just can't imagine what this woman should do in order to get justice. There is no justice for her. Like, because if you go to the Taliban, they would just say, you know, you have to do whatever your husband is telling you, you know, if he doesn't want to give you a divorce, you're done. You shouldn't be getting a divorce. So like, I would be telling that story from all angles. Like, how do 20 million people live in a society that they don't have rights, that there is no legal system put in place to protect them? How is their situation?
Very good. Sammy, what would you do? What does the West need to know?
I mean, all the things that Summia and Zahra said are very, very valid. And but you know, remembering the interest of the Western media in Afghanistan, I would suggest two stories. First, how the international aid is being spent by the Taliban. Nobody is covering that. There is no access. And the Western countries have sent $1.7 billion to Afghanistan since Taliban. Yeah.
Since the Taliban, wow.
Yeah. There is $40 million going to Afghanistan on weekly basis. How is that spent? And how do we know that Taliban are not using that to suppress women, to suppress minorities, to, you know, help and support their terror affiliates? That's the first topic. The second topic is, I think the international media should keep an eye on the re-emergence or new emergence of terror groups with global agenda. That's happening in Afghanistan. And you see that, you know, the Chinese nationals were attacked yesterday. 2 weeks ago, the Pakistani embassy was attacked. 3 months ago, Russian embassy was attacked. And we see, you know, the movement of some terrorists across the country. We had a report about Al-Qaeda members moving to the northern province of Baghlan, and challenging the claim by the Taliban and the belief by the Americans that Taliban are going to be their new allies in the new war against terror.
Those are all great stories. This has been a fun hour. Fun, that's probably not exactly the right characterization, but I can see why journalism was such a jewel in Afghanistan. All of you are great representatives in a profession that I certainly revere. And I want to thank you, Summia, Zahra, Sammy. You are just fabulous representatives of Afghan journalism. And I hope that people who are listening to this will take some of those stories and run with them. And I thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.